Hi there, welcome back to another video. Going to be covering a game from the BBC programme Chess Masters, the Endgame. Many of you might have thought that I'd be looking at episode 2, but actually I'm going to look at a game from episode 1. More so because, one, it was an opening that I play. I also saw one of the commentators, one of the players actually do a video on the game as well. I just wanted to try and give a bit of advice on how to get better as well. So this is actually a game between Nick and Lula, and Nick was with the white pieces. We're going to be looking at from the black pieces today because the game, well, it was a French defence, which is my speciality. The opening that I've played for probably nearly 30 years now, so I absolutely love it. Just in case you're wondering, episode 2's gone. If you want to catch up, you can catch up on BBC iPlayer. Strongly recommend you do. I really like the fact that we've got chess on TV. I think many chess players want there to be more chess within the programme, but we can only do so much. It's there to introduce more new players to the game, and I think it's definitely going to do that. But let's crack on with the chess and just respond to a couple of things. So first of all, we've got the French defence. This is the starting position pretty much of the French. We are kind of attacking the centre, but defending our pawn with a pawn. And White's got 4 main options here, and I think Lula's done a video on it, and she said that she's never played against, or not never played, but very rarely plays against the Tarrasch, which is the opening that Nick chose in this game. And Nick also played against Navi, where he chose the same move. I actually don't think that this is the right opening for Nick to go, because he's called the swashbuckler. I think he wants more of an attacking game, and actually with the Tarrasch, you're kind of not putting your knight on the most aggressive square. For example, coming further forward with your knight at the start is more aggressive, and you're also blocking your bishop in at the same time. So it's not the most aggressive line, but I mean in this game it actually kind of works out for him. The most critical lines, to be honest, I think when you're new to chess, you should just play the advance. This is the most common opening line against the French, and it's also good. White takes advantage of having the first move by being able to take more space than Black by pushing this pawn forward. And then this is also another reason why I quite like playing the French. And this is some of the things that I'm going to be going into today, because as a French player, I'm happy to see this move because I like what we call closed positions. So you see these 4 pawns here in the centre. None of them can take each other, and they're completely stuck. And this means that the centre is closed. And therefore moving your pieces around isn't quite as easy as it normally would be if, say, for example, some of these pawns were exchanged. So, for example, if we go back here and suppose somebody plays the exchange variation against you, you've got a lot more freedom as Black here. For a start, this pawn's been removed, so your bishop can move all the way out. And you don't really need to learn much in the exchange variation when playing the French to start off with, because you pretty much just put this knight here, this bishop here, and just get castled, and then let's just see what happens. So the advanced variation, and especially for White, there's quite a few tactics in it as well, and traps that might catch a Black player out here playing the French. So this would be my advice to Nick to take this up and to look at some of the traps that are associated with it. Again though, and it kind of I think in Lula's video she said she hadn't played against the Tarrasch very much, which is a bit interesting. I think she probably played it a lot online, I should imagine. And so she should have come up with it before. And here she played bishop e7, which is a line that she said she'd come up with her coach, which I find very surprising. I think she mentioned before that she's also played the open Tarrasch with c5, which is one of the most critical lines to play. And I've played this as well in quite a few recent games with some success too. But in my opinion, it's just bishop e7 here is just completely the wrong variation to play. It's very, very technical. And so, for example, in the game, e5 is played, which now kind of transposes to an advanced variation in some ways. And I've got to give some credit as well. They're playing with 10 minutes on the clock each, which is not very much time, so they haven't got time to think. And here you kind of need time to think if you're playing this variation of the French, because, for example, there's some lines where actually moving your bishop back to f8 is actually one of the best moves, or one of the top engine moves, I should imagine, which is a really strange move. I'm not saying it can be played here. You probably wouldn't play it maybe right at this time. You'd probably play just c5 straight away, which I think is what was suggested. But a move like bishop to f8, you know, who's playing this in an actual game? You know, if you're new to chess, it's a kind of move that I absolutely love. That's why I play the French. I love these like kind of sneaky underdeveloping your piece. Is that the right term? I don't even know. Yeah, it's undeveloping your piece. You know, putting it back to the square where it came, but it just makes space for the knight to come out. Defend your weak point, which is this pawn on g7. Usually this queen comes to g4 in some lines to attack in. It's quite awkward to defend. I also like the fact that after queen attacking this pawn, we can actually play a move like king f8 and not castle. This is a typical French idea. And actually, if we talk about typical French ideas about why you love playing the French, is we love playing the French because it gives us this closed position. We love playing the French because, for example, normally you're getting your kingside pieces out and you're trying to castle kingside. Whereas in the French, this main line here just goes, so you bring a knight out, then you bring your queen out. One, you're bringing your queen out really early, which is not normal. But two, you're developing all your queenside pieces. Even this bishop comes to here, and I guess some people might even follow up by castling queenside. And I just really attracted to this. When I was younger, I thought, oh, this is fantastic. I'm doing something different to what my opponent normally faces. I also really like playing with the knights. And so here we've got this knight, especially this knight on g8, and you think, where's the best outpost for this knight? And you can see it can get to this square on f5 in two ways. It can either come out to the side of the board and then come in, or it can come to this square and then jump into f5. And it's kind of got slightly different wrinkles about getting there. But I absolutely love playing close positions, moving my knights around the edge of the boards, trying to get a little advantage here, trying to get a little break. And these are the reasons why you should play the French. You shouldn't be bothered about moving your king. You kind of keep your king in the centre because the centre is closed, so you're not rushed to castle really quickly because they can't get through to it. So I quite like this. If these are the reasons why you play the French, or you like those reasons, you're not too bothered about castling, you like playing with your knights, you like closed positions, you want to do something different to most of the other openings, because most of them are quite open, so therefore that's why people find it difficult to play against the French defence, because they're not used to playing this style of chess. If they're the reasons that you want to play it, then you should definitely play the French, but especially when you're new, you need to choose your opening lines carefully to make sure that they're suited to the reasons why you chose to play the French in the first place. And so, for example, here, the move that every new French player should play is they should just play this main line with knight f6. This is the line that you should play, because immediately White's main move is to push on. You bring the knight back to this square, and then we get a whole host of moves here where it's just pretty simple developing moves. You're still playing the same, for example, c5, knight c6. This is the same as the advance. You don't need to remember much here. And then White's got a few options here. They can bring this knight out to f3 as per normal and get castle, which they might do. In which case you've just still got your typical French structure. Against the pawn phalanx that White's got, and you just play a typical closed position. There's nothing wrong with this. You don't need to learn more than this at this stage. One of the main moves here, though, is to actually put this knight in front of the king. And the reason is that White is going to overprotect this pawn on d4 to make sure that we can't win it as black, which is quite important. And in this variation, there's pretty much one thing that you have to remember. Most people here want to play moves like f6, but this is a really big mistake. You have to capture the pawn on d4 first before playing this. So you take, and then you play the move f6. And the reason for this is that there is a variation here which involves this knight coming to f4, attacking this pawn on e6, and you have to be able to respond to this move with knight takes d4. If you don't do this, then let's just see what happens. If you play f6 too soon, then after knight f4, you can't play knight takes d4 because the pawn will just take your knight. This is still potentially playable. Maybe you can play queen e7 here instead to defend the pawn, but usually this is because you've gone wrong. So you just need to remember, before playing f6, do c takes d4, and then this knight f4 line, while it is crazy, it's still perfectly playable for black, and it's actually quite exciting. And there's not actually that much to learn, really. So you take the pawn. You're actually going to go behind here, and I think they can go e takes f6 check first as well, and then knight g6 check, and you lose your rook on h8, your king moves across, and this is a perfect French position for every French player. The reason being, we as French players, we love having our king exposed like this. We love being an exchange down in exchange for a pawn. Our central pawn's going to be moving forward. This bishop's going to be coming out to this square. White's pieces aren't very far forward at all. We've got the centre. This is a really nice, unique, dynamic position. And every French player should love this line. There's a little bit of learning to do, but it's not actually that much. The main line goes something like after f6, usually they take, you take back, and let's suppose they put the knight here, you bring your bishop out. And these are just simple moves, castles, castles. Now, I might have gone through that quickly, but actually they're just simple moves, putting your knights and bishops on simple squares and getting castled. And you get to this position. Is there more theory to learn? Well, my rating around 2200 and up, yeah, you need to know a little bit more than this. But if you're rated, let's say under 1900, yeah, or not at all, you don't need to know anything more than this at all. You might not even get this far in the opening theory. You just play a game from here. If you want to know some more positional stuff, then there is a big fight for this control over this square on e5. Black's trying to move this pawn forward at some point. White's trying to land a piece on e5. So, for example, bishop f4, maybe rook e1 or something like that. This knight comes out the way. White, and that's what it revolves around. You don't need to worry about that yet. I don't think one square control is going to dominate the game at that level. So you just play a game of chess from here, and you don't need to worry about anything else. And as a French player, I really like it. There's a nice little idea of rerouting your bishop this way. I've done this in some of my games. And actually, I think this is just a very simple variation to play. It gets you everything that you want as a French player. So I don't know why you wouldn't play this line, especially when you're new to the game. So this makes, to me, this makes a lot of sense, and maybe that's something to do with a conversation that people have to have with their coaches. But I generally find this quite a lot when I coach people around the, let's say, 1500 to 1800 level. Is that, and actually maybe even just people in general, they say, "Oh, I don't like this variation," or I don't want to do this. And I don't think it's sometimes the case of the variation. It might be a case that there's variations in every opening where you're going to think, "Oh, I'm going to have to put more work in here." And I think sometimes it's putting the work in that's the problem, rather than actually the variations themselves. If there's a variation that's bothering you, there's a number of things that you can do. One, you're going to need to go and put some work in, get a variation that you're happy with, work with a coach to actually really solve the problem, rather than actually just trying to avoid it. Two, play that variation yourself. If the variation's so good against you, well, why don't you play it if you're capable of doing it? So if you're an e4 player here and you really like the Tarish against the French, and you hate playing against it as the French player, then go and play the Tarish yourself. And then what you're going to do is you're going to find, oh, actually that's not so good. And then you'll start to think, well, actually maybe this is just, maybe it's in my mind rather than the actual moves that are being played, as to why you might not like a variation. But okay, let's have a look at the game. So obviously key to note that they're only playing with 10 minutes on the clock, and here knight d7 is just, I should imagine, a time pressure move. Eventually c5 does come in, and then we see here, because of this bishop being on e7, it blocks this knight coming this way to the f5 score, or maybe even to this way and go further, and the knight gets developed to the edge of the board, which in the French is quite normal. We do this in the advance, as I showed you before, but with the bishop being on f8, it's a little bit different, because the point is that after we get a few more moves we're going to see, so this typical French moves as well. Interesting idea from Nick to play knight h3, by the way. I really quite like this. I think he gets a really good opening. And now we see that we have this little mini problem. This bishop's attacking this knight, and we're going to take it with the pawn. Now, normally this isn't actually a big issue. If the bishop was back on f8, actually when this exchange happens, the bishop actually comes to g7, and actually black's king has been shown to be perfectly fine, although maybe not in this exact position. But usually the bishop gets developed to g7, you don't have a weak pawn on h6 in the end, and actually everything's usually quite secure. But because the bishop's on e7, and you kind of have this natural feeling not to withdraw it, the actual knight on h6 here is kind of under attack, and maybe putting it onto f5 would be okay, But the problem is, I wonder if white can get away with g4 there. Or do they need to defend the pawn on d4? Probably need to defend the pawn on d4 here because we've got no checks. But is bishop takes knight really a threat? It does double our pawns, but white has lost their key attacking the piece in the light square bishop. So as a French player, I'm perfectly fine with that. I'd actually, in fact, the knight on d7 actually has a bonus point here. You can come to f8 and actually come into this e6 square. Maybe the bishop wants to go there, depending on what white does. This knight coming back to f8 and into these squares, typical kind of French play, manoeuvring the knights around in the closed position, keeping our king in the centre. Not because we don't want to castle, we do, but we just got other things to do first. And also, we also like to keep our opponent guessing. Are we going to go king side with castling, or are we going to go queen side? Which way are we going to go? And we can make that decision maybe later on because there's not an immediate threat to the king. So this was f6 was played, which is a very aggressive move. And okay, takes and castles, and then this is a good move to actually close up the king side to stop this bishop from having a bit of an attack. And okay, it starts to go a little crazy here. Knight h4 is some nice tactics from Nick, and Lula spots them. She takes a pawn, gives a check, and now the black king is truly in the centre because it can't castle anymore because it's been moved. But the big problem is that white really wants to just stick these rooks on these files. Stick the rooks on these files and then just go, okay, how are you breaking out? And at some point I'm going to sacrifice my way through to come and get you. But I think the other problem is that there's two pieces under attack. And maybe this is just a little bit unfortunate. I actually think Nick's not played this terribly badly. And maybe he's a little bit unlucky because you could easily see white winning this game from this position. With black's king being in such a mess. But actually just very unlucky that he doesn't quite have enough. And fair play to Lula, she plays chase the queen. Please swap queens with me at every opportunity. I think she picks up that this was a bit of a nothing move. But it doesn't matter. He sacks another piece to get through. But he just doesn't have enough for the attack. And eventually, as the black pieces now, you see all the black pieces surrounding the king. That it's just too much, and white's just losing. But it's quite interesting though because to me this is like such an easy win, and especially now the queens are exchanged. This is the key moment of the game, or we're coming up to the key moment of the game in a minute, because here at this point this should be a very easy technical win. It's not just a case that it's a bishop against two pawns. It's more a case that black's pieces are really active as well. So for example, this knight on h3 can't actually move anywhere at the moment. It's completely stuck. So white is eventually going to get this knight out of the way, but it's black's pieces. This rook on d4, it can attack these pawns forwards and sideways. The bishop's going to be quite active. This rook on g8 is active. So black's going to pick up more material here. It's not a bishop for 2 pawns, so rook for 2 pawns. It's because I had something in mind in a couple of moves. And after rook g4, g3, h4, this is, it's maybe not needed, but at least does something. Really, this is kind of the wrong plan. You probably should just whip off these 2 pawns. So just start attacking those 2 pawns, and then just march this pawn to the end of the board, and that would just win the game. Another way of winning the game would be to swap off a pair of rooks, or to actually just swap off this rook and knight if you can do. I would suggest maybe something like probably king forward, rook across, rook d1. And that just completely gets rid of white's main attacking piece, which is the rook. But okay, Lula tries for this attack, and okay, the clocks are ticking down here, so they haven't got much time. But I think it was at this moment, when I played through the game again, that I was a bit surprised here, because she took, and then went check, and then actually ended up losing an exchange back. And all of a sudden, it's a bishop against 2 pawns in an endgame, where she's got to be really careful. But luckily she's just got enough, because here after this check she's picking up this pawn, and everything should fall then, and the extra bishop should be quite easy to win. But I was just quite amazed really that actually here at this point back here after knight f4 they clearly both just missed that they can just do rook takes knight, and that's a free piece, which would be because they can't take the pawn can't take the rook because the king would be under attack. So maybe this is this is such a simple thing. It's a simple capture. Both players are more than capable of seeing this move. Why did they miss it? Pressure of the situation. being in front of all those TV cameras, playing in the game where you're down to, what was it, 2 or 3 minutes each left at that point, maybe even less, because they're rushing. All of these things combine to make you make some really silly moves, and so the standard of play will just drop off and drop off and drop off. And obviously it did here with a free piece going begging. I think maybe F3 is quite an interesting move here, actually. I don't know what she had planned against that. I think that would be an interesting way to continue for white. But that's the game. I missed out a whole chunk really about that sacrifice in the centre, because to me that wasn't really important. It was more the finish of the game around this point here, and also the opening, which I thought was really interesting. Many players come to me and they talk to me about, I play this opening, or I'll never face this, or I want to change my opening because of X, Y, and Z. And actually here sometimes it's just about selecting the correct opening variation for what stage you're at. And here the knight f6 line against the Tarash is definitely the first line that you should play. You should just get good at this and just keep it simple and play this again and again and again when you're starting out. I've played a game in the Olympiads back in October in this line, but I've also played c5 to some success, but this is because I wanted to experiment with some open positions. But naturally, I like the closed positions, and this is where every French player should be playing, especially when they're just starting out. But okay, episode 2 was on last Monday, so I'll probably do another video just covering one of those games. But I'm looking forward to episode 3 this Monday at 8 o'clock on BBC 2. If you've not watched them, then you can obviously watch them on BBC iPlayer. I think that they're really good, and hopefully we get more people joining chess clubs in the UK. Thanks for watching. Give me a like and a subscribe, and there'll be more videos coming out. Thank you.